Oh, hey, look, that's pretty funny. Last video I talked about how guns are bad, and now I'm going to be talking about the evolution of guns during the Civil War. That is not a good transition. Now, you probably heard me talk about cannons a lot, and of course, guns. But I talked mainly about what guns were used, and not about how guns were changed over the 4 years of the American Civil War. Now, you might be thinking that the Civil War and guns did not change. It was just like from smoothbore to rifled. That's it. Wow, you are very far out. It isn't just the rifles that changed, also the pistols changed. The ammunition changed. Every single thing about Civil War firearms changed. Just in 4 years. Went through smoothbore, percussion cap, and Maynard tape primer systems, and all the way into 1865, and boom, we have repeaters. So let's dive into the evolution of Civil War firearms. You're probably familiar with smoothbore Flintlock muskets. During the American Civil War, smoothbore muskets were used extensively. They're the ones with the 2 cocking handles. You rip the cartridge, pour a bit of the powder in there, put it in there, ram it down, pull this back, put this back too, and then fire. Well, that works, but you see, the back one uses a mechanism called flint and steel. You know in Minecraft, how you go with that weird flint and steel thing? That's what's happening right here. When you pull this back and then put it back forward, you're cocking it so that the trigger can be pulled. And then when the trigger is pulled, the flint strikes the steel, sending sparks down into the gunpowder, and it takes a single ember to fly into the barrel to ignite the entire gunpowder charge to launch the musket ball out. Now, the musket ball at the time was usually the 69 caliber. If you've ever seen the Patriots, they would have to make it in the field sometimes, and make it themselves, which is a very slow process. But even though they were very popular during the American Revolution, the Chancellorsville rifles, I have no idea if that's how you pronounce it, because, wait for it, it's a French name, they really liked it, so they created their own type, the Brown Bess. I hopefully think that it's the Brown Bess. Maybe it's the British Brown Bess, but I have no idea because I'm not a Revolutionary War expert. I'm a Civil War expert, everyone. So all of these, they look nice, and plus they are pretty good for movie props, but there's only one downside. You see, flint and steel. If you ever tried to use flint and steel in real life, you know that flint and steel doesn't work how it works in Minecraft. In Minecraft, you just go ding and boom, the TNT that you just put on the ground explodes and you killed yourself. But for real flint and steel, it's just light. That is the reason why I would never want to get flint and steel for a survival tool. I depend on matches. Wait for the matches later. I will be talking about them because they're important. And because of this, whenever you fire it, there's only like a 50% chance that's actually going to make a spark to get into the gunpowder. When this happens, then the bullet starts flying out. But when it doesn't happen, well, then you won't be able to fire. Second reason why the Flintlock smoothbore musket was the worst weapon that you could desire was because of the gunpowder. The only way for them to be able to fire the gun is with a priming mechanism. That priming mechanism would be with the Flintlock system. But there's also something else that's important. When you tear the cartridge, you have to pour a tiny bit in there, close it, and then do that. There's a very large problem with that. That problem is simple. When you try to put that in practice, you want to reload and hold it like that so that you can be ready. The gunpowder will just fall out. And also, if you're firing in moist conditions, then the moist conditions will probably make the gunpowder soak, which is not good for gunpowder, especially because it's black powder. And also, it's completely exposed. Not the best combination. Therefore, the Flintlock Musket was taken out of the new 1812 musket. But there was something that they still did not understand that was bad. You see, the barrel is important. That's how the bullet comes out. Smoothbore muskets have smooth-bored rifled barrels. They did not have grooves in it, which means that they were not accurate. You could fire up to 100 yards accurately, and then anything like 101 yards, you would completely miss the target and hit your best friend or something like that. But this issue was not actually fixed until many years later. Now, this type of musket used a new type of mechanism, the percussion cap. Now, remember when I talked about the matches? Well, matches have a chemical on its head that is similar to fulminate mercury. And fulminate mercury is contained in these little tiny brass, copper, top hat shaped mini caps. It is put in the inside of it. Then it is slipped into a tiny nipple. Pull the hammer back, and when the trigger is pulled, the hammer strikes the percussion cap, setting a jet of flames into a small little hole, straight into the barrel, igniting the gunpowder, launching the bullet out. Now, just a little reminder, they were still using round 69 caliber round shots. That was going to turn into a different direction in the 4 years of the American Civil War. But for now, the 1812 rifle was replaced by something that you probably know as the 1842 musket. Now, the 1842 was very high quality. Many soldiers during the beginning of the American Civil War valued them as one of the greatest rifles ever created. Now, you need to remember that it was still a smooth-bore musket, which means it was not that accurate. So, they fixed this problem by loading their 1842 Springfield muskets with buck and ball. It consists of 169 caliber, of course, because every single non-rifled musket needs to have it, and of course, 3 tiny little buckshots, effectively turning your smoothbore musket into a shotgun. This had devastating effects at close ranges. During the beginning of the Civil War, they were highly valued and are still highly valued, although they are very rare to buy right now. They are about $11,000, as I learned today because I got to hold one. But there was still that one specific problem. It was not rifled yet. Oh, don't worry, everyone. They're going to rifle it right now. Well, you probably know about the 1855 Springfield Musket. Now, in this musket, they, instead of using the usual percussion cap, remember what they looked like? Bang. Instead of using that, they used the Maynard tape primer, named after its inventor, Dr. Maynard. He was called Doctor not because he had a doctorate degree, but because he was a doctor. That is the first time I ever heard about that, and it's probably the first time you ever heard about that too. Now, the Maynard tape primer was a bit like the toy cap guns that you use for your kids. Whenever a shot was fired, the tape would advance. But although this looked very reliable and very scientific and futuristic, it did not work anything near the percussion cap. whenever it was fired, it was only a 50% chance that it'll actually ignite the gunpowder inside the barrel, making it very unreliable. They were hated by many soldiers. General George Meade, during the American Civil War, whose company had been promised Springfield Model 1842 muskets, were given these types of 55 muskets. They said that it was the worst weapon that they ever had. The Maynard tape primer was very susceptible to weather and conditioning, and they all hated it. Nice bit of lying for the U.S. military and its history, effectively downplaying the United States, country of America, whatever it was called at these times. Fun fact, they were only called these United States of America at the time, but the Civil War changed that to make it the United States, not these. Now, they started working on a new type of rifle. This one, they would eliminate the Maynard tape primer, and they would replace it with the percussion cap again. A bit slower, but more weather resistant. And it took so many more years to make it. But it would be worth the studying and designing, because it would create the most popular weapon of the American Civil War. The model 1861 Springfield Rifle Musket. And guess what? It was rifled! So now you can kill somebody from about 1 to 3 miles, I guess. Now, this one, of course, had a percussion cap system. This is not loaded, if you can't tell. And it used a regular brass trigger guard. Now, that's important because the brass trigger guard allowed it to be moisture resistant, so that the water wouldn't clog up the trigger and make the trigger unmovable. Because that would be bad, because you need a trigger to fire the actual thing. Now, it had a bunch of metal bands over here. This is where the ramming rod would be caught. If you do not know what a ramming rod is, these days, in order to load a gun, you just gotta go ding, bang, bang, and then you can go fully auto. That's not how it worked in the Civil War. It wasn't even bolt action yet. Instead, it was a musket. So they had a specific training procedure referred to as load in 9 times. There are 9 steps to load. The first step came right after the officer said, load in 9 times. Load. They would place it smartly in between their feet and put it in such a position that they could have easy access to their, the ramming rod. And then the next step would be handle cartridge. You would open up your cartridge box and put the paper cartridge containing the black powder or gunpowder for you modern day enthusiasts, and the mini ball. It's made of paper, by the way. You would put it next to your mouth, and the next step was tear a cartridge. You'd bite it, spit it out, and put it right next to the barrel. The next step would be charge cartridge. You take the newly ripped cartridge and pour the gunpowder inside the barrel. And then you also squeeze the mini ball in. The next one is draw rammer, where you take the rammer out and put the head of the rammer or the ball of the rammer, whatever you would like to call it, on top of the barrel, on top of the bullet. Then the next one would be ram cartridge, where you would take the ram rod, stick it in, and then take it out again. And then the next step was return rammer. Now that part's important. If you did not return rammer, then you would shoot your rammer at the enemy. And if you did that, then you would not be able to reload. If you forget return rammer, then you won't be able to use it for a second time. Take it, put it in. Now notice how I use my pinky finger. If I don't use my pinky finger and I do that, if the gunpowder cooks off and my hand goes blowing off, I won't be able to even pull a trigger or anything like that. So they would use the pinky finger because the pinky finger was extendable. I'm not saying that you would want to shoot your pinky finger out, but if you had to reload your weapon multiple times, then just get rid of your pinky finger. After doing that, you'd put into this position after the officer says prime. Prime, you pull the hammer down to half cock, and you place the percussion cap into the notch. Then, historically, if you've ever been to a national park, they would go immediately to ready, aim, fire. But historically, after priming, they would do shoulder arms. And that was the regular 1861 Springfield model, or Springfield Musket drill. Now, a few minor improvements. Of course, this one had a tiny detail, which was the rifled mechanism. The rifled were a bunch of grooves, spiral grooves inside of the barrel, which allowed the mini ball, I'm not sure if I have it here or not. Yeah, so it would be able to launch this out while spinning. And if you ever played with a top before, if you put the top on its tip, it's just going to fall over. But if you spin the top, it's going to stand up. So that was able to make this go further and, of course, more accurately. The mini ball was extremely deadly, but I'll have to cover that soon. Maybe in another video. Now, the 41 musket was pretty good, but there was only one problem. The loading procedure. That was the problem. It was very hard. So, they decided to get something that could repeat. But repeating rifles would have to wait for a tiny bit. This is obviously not real. This is a cap gun. But it's a nice little way of looking at a regular Colt pistol. This Colt pistol was if it was real, then it would be an Army revolver. Colt Army revolver model 1860. Now, what this was, it was invented by a man named Colt. And he was a great man. They said that God created man and Samuel Colt made them equal because of guns. Now, they were known for their pistols, their revolvers. They had revolving barrels, unlike the ones that we use these days. And in order to fire it, you had to load the bullet, the powder, and of course the percussion cap in, ram it in with this, pull the hammer, and pull the trigger. Now, it was special because you did not have to be you did not have to do that. All you have to do is put all the bullets in, which took 10 minutes, by the way, because, well, that's sad, but it could hold 6 rounds, which meant that you could just blow 6 people's heads off without having to reload that much. But there was a downside. This is a pistol. That's the downside. Because it was a pistol, it was very hard to take somebody, say, at that mailbox over there that you can't see. If you wanted to hit somebody, then you probably have to hit somebody right here. But as you probably know, that is not that reliable. And plus, the loading procedure took 10 minutes. That is much longer than a Springfield model 1861. But this was rifled, so it was at least semi-accurate. But in order for repeaters to become really successful, they had to leave the regular pistol. Now, repeating rifles are basically Springfield model 1861s, but they're repeating. Now, one thing that you gotta remember is that they're breech loaded. A problem I didn't mention about the model 1861 was that you had to load it through the barrel. So you could only do it standing. Well, you could do it lying down, but that's a very big pain. So they decided to be like, how about you don't just put the bullet in the barrel, but put the bullet in the back? Well, that's what breech load means, because it was loaded in the breech. Simple? Okay, good, because you're gonna have to remember that for like 5 years. Now, breech-loaded rifles were usually used for cavalry. Now, there were two different types of breech-loaded repeating rifles. The first one was the carbine, which was usually used for the cavalry because they were shorter. And then there were the rifles, which would be used by infantry, for example, the United States and Confederate sharpshooters. Now, the first type was the Sharps. I'm pretty sure I've got one of their bullets over here. This is a model 1852 Sharps rifle bullet. Now, Sharps rifles were single shot, but they were loaded in the breech. They were not completely repeating rifles at the time. So they would use a rolling block design. So what they would do is they would take the lever right on top of the trigger guard and pull it up, and a little block would come up, which would allow you to see a little hole inside the back of the carbine. You would take a paper cartridge, except the Sharps bullet was sticking out, shove it in there, pull this back, but there was only one problem. You still had to take a percussion cap. Bang! But there was a very big improvement. You did not need to do this now. All you had to do is go, boom, you can go shoot somebody. And plus, they were deadly accurate. Sharps rifles were very common. But there was one problem. And this problem is not anything like smoothbore barrels. It's not that. It's deadly for the shooter. You see, there was a problem. The rolling block design did not enclose the barrel well enough, so sometimes the entire gun blew up. That is a very big inconvenience for the person who's shooting the actual gun. What I mean by inconvenience is their entire face would blow off. That is not good, everyone. So it was kind of a failure and kind of a success. You can't really tell because it's just in between. So it was replaced by the Burnside carbine. If you've ever heard of General Burnside, he invented a lot of stuff. Burnside cartridge box, Burnside ammunition, Burnside rifle. Now, something about the Burnside rifle was pretty cool. So General Burnside, who invented all this stuff, saw a Sharps rifle being used in action. And he saw the guy's face blow off after trying to shoot it. So he was like, how about we not use paper weakling cartridges and we replace it with metal cartridges? Now, the type of metal cartridge that he invented was a far cry from the ones that we see today. This is a .40 caliber Smith & Wesson 2020 model. Definitely not used during the Civil War. It had metallic cartridges, and that was important. Now, these ones also used metallic cartridges. They look a bit like ice cream cones, and they contain the gunpowder and the bullet. When it was fired, the percussion cap would launch a tiny little ember straight into the gunpowder. Bam! It's out. And then when you pull that, it comes back out. Now, it was loaded by doing that, and then you would stick it not sideways, but straight down. And then when you pulled the lever back, it would immediately automatically turn the bullet back and shove it into the barrel while closing. That was the whole problem. But that was a major problem with the Burnside. It was very people did not like the Burnside, that's all I can say. And especially the people who were using it when it cooked off, because, their face would be gone. That would be annoying, right? So they replaced it with the Dispenser, by far the most famous repeating rifle of the American Civil War. The Dispenser was basically the exact same thing as the Burnside and that other one. But there was a difference. You know what that difference is? Instead of being a single shot, they would put multiple bullets in it. That's good. Although it did use paper cartridges, all you gotta do is flip it over for some reason, unlock this, pull it out, 6, 7 bullets in there, put it back in, lock it, go, bang, bang. And another thing that's better with this is, guess what? You did not need a percussion cap. The percussion cap was inside the actual cartridges. Big improvement, yay! But there was still one problem. Instead of just 1 bullet clicking off and blowing your face off, it was 7 bullets clicking off and blowing your entire body into bits. That was not very convenient for the person who's shooting it, and very convenient for the person's trying to shoot. So they replaced it with the final and ultimate Civil War repeating rifle, the Henry. If you ever seen a photo of the Henry, you probably think that it's a Winchester. Well, no. The person who invented it, whose name was, guess what? Henry, worked with a man named Winchester, and that guy named Winchester created the Winchester Rifle by literally stealing from the Henry. Now, the Henry had brass golden plates, and it was very simple to reload. So all you had to do is you would pull this up, and it would remove the barrel so that you could stick all the 14 rounds. Yes, 14 rounds. Put it in, pull it back, and then bang, bang. Now this one was the ultimate because guess what? Your face would not blow off every once in a while. Instead, the new type of mechanism allowed the gun's barrel to explode, not your face. And although your gun can't shoot anymore, at least you can be alive to use another gun. Now the Henry was replaced by the Winchester after the war. But there was still one thing that you gotta understand. The officers did not like repeaters. They thought that if somebody had a repeater, then they would just waste all their rounds. Therefore, the model 1861 Springfield Rifle Musket stayed the king of rifled muskets for the entire Civil War era. But, as you can see, a lot has changed since 1861 to 1865. From smoothbores all the way to 14-round rifled repeaters. And it makes you wonder, how come a few years ago we had a fully auto, and now we have semi-automatic? Are we going back to the dark ages? Maybe soon we'll be using bayonets to fight. Well, that is a mystery for the future. But you'll all know how the mystical war of the Civil War happened and how it changed the firearm forever and ever.